I got a bunch of questions here. First question that we have is, how do we raise kids so they would learn how to have healthy relationships? And this one is actually pretty easy. We just have a healthy relationship that we model for them with our person. So most of us learn everything about relationships from our childhood. And so then we have this decision to make about if we reflect or we react to that. And so increasingly, I work with a lot of people who say, I do not want to reflect the relationship style I learned. I want to change that. And so I'm going to react to that. I'm going to do something different. So I think the best way to have kids who have healthy relationship is to have a healthy one yourself. And that maybe seems challenging because it means that you have to do the work in the relationship. So if you want to have kids who have healthy relationships, do that with your person. And if your person's unwilling to work on having a healthy relationship, work on healthy relationships for yourself and getting better and improving, so that even if your kids see a person who really wants a healthy relationship paired with someone who doesn't, they still see that you're making an effort to get better. Because again, we can't control that other person, unfortunately. And so if they're unwilling to work, demonstrate for kids, like, I'm still willing to do the work even if they won't, because even that means something. Even if it's not ideal, the kids will leave that situation and say, so-and-so wasn't willing to work, but they were, and that meant a lot. Okay. How to handle a soft spot that won't let go of the person you know isn't right for you. So what I imagine this question is asking me is, how do I let go of someone that I'm interested in or have this attraction to that I know is not healthy for me? And here's the thing. First thing, I think it's okay to be attracted to people, so I wouldn't beat myself up for that. If we know, though, logically that this is not a good person for us, or it's not a healthy fit, or there's baggage there, whatever that thing is, I think then what we want to do is we want to just kind of look at, what is that about for us? Sometimes we are attracted to people who are all wrong for us because they have something that we haven't worked through yet, or they're doing something that we struggle to do. So we might be really attracted to someone who, sometimes they're the rebel, or they're the bad boy or something like that. And the reason is because we don't feel like we're doing stuff like that. We don't feel like we're really living, or we don't feel like we're ever kind of doing things spontaneously. So sometimes we're attracted to people because they're living, doing, experiencing something we're not doing for ourselves. And so what happens is, oftentimes when we start to do that thing that we're missing, those people become a lot less attractive because they're no longer the missing link. And so if you're in a position where you go, man, I keep coming back to this person even though I know that they're all wrong for me, what you kind of need to do is figure out, what is that about? What is the thing that you're really attracted to? And are you missing that in your life, right? So if that's spontaneity, or it's passion or intensity, like, what is that thing you're missing? And then how do I pursue that in a healthy way? Because knowing that once I do pursue it in a healthy way, this other person will be less attractive. So try that. I received several questions about, how do I know when a relationship is over? And to just be really honest with you, I always kind of hesitate with these questions. In fact, a lot of times I'm not sure that I should answer them. And I'll tell you why. Is because the last thing that I want to do is tell you when, and then have someone leave this and say, oh, here's the thing. There's this internet therapist, Jason Van Ruler, and he told me that we should probably get divorced. And so guess what? We're getting divorced. So that's just a fear of mine and not something I want to do. But I can tell you about some traits or some kind of guideposts that might tell you the relationship is over. I think it's going to depend kind of on the type of relationship you have. Choosing to end a marriage is a different choice than choosing to end a dating relationship. There's just more pieces involved, and it's bigger. Choosing to end a relationship with kids is different than choosing to end a relationship with no kids. It's just different. So I think you have to kind of consider, what I'll always tell people is, what is, not what if. So what is today? Where are we at today? What's on the table? What are the likely consequences? So if you come to me and you say, Jason, I'm in a relationship, I'm thinking of ending it. First, I'll just say, okay, all right, I get that. That must be really tough for you. Because if you're to that point where you're considering it, that's not an easy place to be. And that didn't happen overnight. So that's really challenging. Secondly, I'll just ask you to consider, what is that going to look like if you do? And I want you to be really honest, meaning if we decide to break up, how does that affect relationships you have with friends, family, things like that? How does it affect our finances? How does it affect our kiddos? How does it affect our schedules? All those things that we don't typically think about, what is that going to look like? And be honest with yourself, because the thing is that sometimes we let a feeling lead us into ending a relationship and we don't consider actually what that's going to entail, and then we feel really badly after that because it's worse than we thought, or the consequences are pretty steep. So my job then becomes to help you decide if the consequences are worth it. And if the consequences are worth it, then that's okay. But something I tell people often is, that first night that you're sleeping alone and you're laying awake, will you feel like this is justified and the right choice? Because that's a lonely place to be. And so the last thing I want you to do is be alone in that middle of the night scenario thinking, I wish I hadn't done this, or I acted impulsively. So we talk about what are the consequences. And then we talk about what is their room for improvement or their willingness to actually change the situation. Because the thing is that it is hard to walk away from someone actually willing to change. Like someone who will do the work, that is pretty rare. And so if you're in a relationship where someone is willing to change and work on it, be really hesitant to let that one go. Because if you do, chances are it's going to be a struggle to find someone willing to do the work again. Now, obviously, all of this is negated if you're in a relationship that is unsafe or there's abuse taking place. Things like that are non-negotiables, and everyone has their own non-negotiables. And so if those are being broken, recognize that that might end the relationship for you. So some people will say, if there's infidelity or betrayal or things like that, that's just, I'm not going to deal with that. So be it. I understand. So some of this too is just knowing what am I really unwilling to work with if it's happened. But if there are problems that the other person is willing to work on, can we do that? Lastly, I would just say, take it slower than you want. If you've had a relationship for a while, take it a little bit slow to make that decision, because it's going to be a hard decision. And there's going to be times you're going to second guess it. And I'm going to want you to come back to, hey, I took a couple of weeks, or I talked to a couple of people, and I really felt in the moment this is the right decision. So I made it, and it's hard now. But again, I talked to some people about it. So take it a little bit slowly and then make that decision. Okay. Someone asked me, at what point in a relationship is it okay to express needs and expectations? You're asking a therapist. I'm going to tell you right off the bat. It's actually, I just wrote it myself, so I'll just tell you that much. It's a good thing to do from the start because we set a tone. The tone of the relationship is, I have some expectations, I have some needs, and that's going to be part of this. Now, I think if you go on your second date and you give them a laundry list, that might be a tough sell, right? You might have a struggle getting the other person to sign on to that. So I think we have to set our expectations along with where the relationship's at, right? So if we're giving them all this laundry list and we're on our second date, that's probably not actually meeting where we're at in the relationship. So we want to have it fit where we're at, but definitely feel free to start with that. Okay. How do you make sure your avoidant partner asking for space during an argument is not just avoidance? It's a good question. And sometimes, unfortunately, people who struggle with some avoidant attachment will say, we'll just take time. And they literally mean it. They'll just actually take forever and never come back, and they can live there. And then people like myself who are anxiously attached, we just don't know what to do with that, right? We're panicking over here because we're not dealing with this, and oh my goodness, the world's falling apart. So I think if you have a partner who is a little too comfortable with space and they say, we're going to take some space, I think we just say okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when are we coming back to this? So I understand that you need some of that. And I want to give that to you, right? Because I don't want you to be emotionally flooded. I don't want it to get messy. And at the same time, we are going to come back to it. So when will we do that so that I can hold you accountable to that? And then will that be in an hour or tomorrow morning? But we're not going to set some ridiculous time where we say, I think in a month we'll come back to that. That's not going to be helpful. So I think if they're in a place where they're in that spot, I think it's just to say, hey, that I really struggle to make that work for me, to just avoid this. And so we need to come back. It's really important. And I would like to do so in X amount of time. So I think that's important. Is closure necessary after a 3-year relationship? Kind of to you. And what you would hope to get out of that. I think sometimes we go with the what if instead of the what is again. So we say, well, what if they told me what I wanted to hear? What if they told me they were really sorry? Or what if they had empathy? Or what if they validated what I thought and felt? And that would be lovely. But sometimes what is the fact that that's not going to happen. And you know that. And you had 3 years to experience that. So I think closure can be helpful if there's something that you want to get out of it that's reasonable and actually likely to happen. But if not, it is often just a pathway to more hurt. Because what's going to happen is you're going to go down that path with expectations that don't fit the person, and you're going to be disappointed yet again. And it's going to be even more hurtful this time because it takes some vulnerability to go in after it's over and try to get closure. And so I would just tell you, like, if they're willing to give that to you and you think that you can actually achieve that, maybe that's worthwhile to you. If not, maybe it's just better to move on. We don't actually have to have closure, if you will, to everything. Sometimes that's something we do on our own. We don't always need the other person for that. And of course, if it were really unhealthy or unsafe or abusive, certainly don't need closure because we're not going to expect that person to be different. Someone said, I have a kiddo and they don't like us to hug or kiss or have physical affection in front of them. What do? I think just kind of normalize, like, that's part of a healthy relationship. Have good boundaries. Obviously, like, making out in front of your kids is kind of weird and probably not for them. So, I think that wouldn't be helpful. But just kind of your typical stuff is just to say, like, yeah, this is part of it. And then realize kids go through that. I think probably all of us on here are like, I don't want to see my parents kiss. Most of us would be unified and like, that's not a picture I want to get in the mail. And so that's okay, but that is part of a relationship. And so just kind of say, like, yeah, we love each other and this is part of it. And we got boundaries about it. And then just recognize, like, kids will always kind of think it's ridiculous, but they'll probably grow out of that. If they don't grow out of it and it continues to be an issue, maybe talk about what that means to them. So when they see that happening, what about that is troubling? And sometimes they have some beliefs or some ideas about it that aren't actually accurate, and that's a good opportunity to have a conversation. So that'd be an option. What about common friends during a breakup? I think if they can swing it, you can swing it, great. I think if you cannot probably enter into that friendship with those people without bad-mouthing the other person, that's probably not awesome. And so can I have these common friends now the relationship has ended and have it with boundaries and not create a bunch of drama and crisis? If I can do that, okay. And if you have a healthy relationship with someone and it still ends, you might even have a conversation with them about that. It's like, how are we going to do this or navigate it? And have some boundaries about that. Is saying mean things to your partner while drunk something you can overcome together? Yes, probably not over a beer, but it is something you could overcome together. A great idea would be to not drink so much. I think this is hard, though, because sometimes we're in a season in our life where we like to go and kind of have fun and go out, and then it gets kind of messy and ends badly. And so I'll get questions sometimes about, like, well, how do we do that? How do we go and maybe drink too much or do some things that aren't super healthy for us, but then be healthy in those unhealthy moments? And so it's kind of like, well, how do I smoke cigarettes but do it in a healthy way? I don't know, like, just don't smoke cigarettes, right? So some of this is, if you have this established pattern in your relationship where we drink too much and then we fight, the kind of obvious answer is we got to stop drinking too much because that's not a good place for us. And so then what I might recommend for the coupleship is just, like, let's talk about a boundary about that. We might say, like, hey, we got a 2-drink limit. When we go out with friends, we'll have 2 drinks, and then we know after that it gets kind of risky for us, and so we're just not going to do that. It's not the best for us anyway, and it's not great for our relationship. Because otherwise, I think if we continue to do that, it's really hard to excuse that behavior over time. Once or twice, maybe there's room for that, but I think if this is a regularly occurring thing, it's just hurtful and damaging, and saying I was drunk doesn't actually make up for it. How do we make a partner feel secure with opposite gender friendships? So this one, I think everyone's got a different view and every relationship is different. So I'm not here to tell you what kind of relationship to have, but what I am here to tell you is that you should have some communicated boundaries about how that looks and what is okay and what isn't. And then it should be transparent about those boundaries. And so if it's, you can only spend time with them if I'm there, or you're communicating with them and I have access to that, whatever those things are, we need to have that discussion. It is not okay to just say like, well, this is how I made it up to be, and I just assumed you'd be okay with that, because that's often where the problems come in. And so I think if you guys are open to having those friendships, so be it, but then let's just talk about how that's going to look and make sure we're on the same page and accountable for that. How do I know if I'm being needy or if my needs are normal? That's a really, really good question. I think I would look at probably what is their effort to meet you where you're at. And so if you say, hey, I've asked for 6 things that I say are my needs and they've met 5, and that's great, but now I'm going to ask for 4 more. Sure, that might be a lot for some people. I think if you ask for 1 need and the person says you're being needy, that is probably a signal that there's a problem in that relationship. Because we all have some needs. I think we just don't need to have like a laundry list of them. But I think we have to look at how responsive is this person to even that one thing. And then we'll build from there. Because if they are, then that's great. Then we're probably going to hit a max point where we have to recognize we won't always get everything we want or need. Like, that's unfortunate. It's adulthood, it's life. But how do I look at that other person trying to meet me there? Are they trying or are they not? How can you deal with someone who has double standards? Let's see. If they have double standards, I guess I'd ask what that's about. Do they admit that they have double standards? And if they do admit to that, then do you want to deal with it or not? That'd just be the decision. If they feel like they don't, then that's a conversation to have where we would lean in and be curious about, why does it seem that way? Why does it seem like you're saying this but doing this instead? And help me connect those two. Last question I'll ask, and then we're going to switch to people asking questions if they'd like to for a bit, is what can I do to release the judgment I am placing against myself? Grace, my friend, grace. We are all human. It is messy sometimes. We all feel broken. And I think that the world is harsh enough that our judgment of ourselves does not make that better. And so I think that there are some things that we're going to notice over time that we legitimately need to change. And there are going to be things that we legitimately regret doing. And sometimes that we look back on and we say, I truly wish I had done it differently. I think that's going to be part of it. But I think judging ourselves really harshly in moments simply limits us from taking steps. Because if we have all this judgment, it makes it really risky to try anything. And so people who are really, really stuck oftentimes are often people who have a lot of judgment against themselves and others, because that judgment translates to that first step being too big to take. And so what I would just tell you is talk to some people, read some books, see how are my expectations in alignment with kind of the rest of the world. Am I harsh? Am I too easy? Like, how does that look? And then try to set more realistic expectations. And then again, where am I at? So if this is where I'm at, I don't like where I'm at. How do I build on that instead of beat myself up about it, right? Because beating myself up about it doesn't do any good. Something that I pick on some people about is my helping you to have some insight is wasted if you use it to beat yourself up with. There's really no point to that. What I want to use is I want you to take that and use it to empower yourself to take a step, because you're worth it. And so just be careful not to do that thing where we have insight and awareness, but we use it to hold ourselves back instead of push us forward. Okay, I'm going to answer some questions for a little while. So fire away and I will try to keep up. I'll start. Someone said, how do I cope with seeing my ex of almost 5 years with someone else after only 4 months of breakup? That is not awesome. I'm sorry. That would be a really tough spot to be in. And certainly it would feel like if they were able to move on that quickly, the relationship must not have been that important. I imagine that's how it would feel. Maybe it wouldn't, but I imagine that. I think just going back to reminding yourself that the relationship is over, they can make their own decisions, and they may or may not make healthy decisions about that. And just saying that that's up to them. But the hard situation, and I think take good care of yourself in that, because it's wounding, I think, if a relationship meant more to us than someone else. And in some ways, though, it does tell us who they are, right? So it just kind of says, like, if I had any suspicion about if this is going to work or not, I guess it's proof. It's painful proof, but I see now that I envision this differently than they did. And so in some ways, it's good to know that because I'm going to have to work to move on, not to reconnect. Okay. Boyfriend took a trip out of state, came back saying didn't want the relationship, and now is saying needs space. Yeah, I think that's abrupt. And I could see how that would be really, really challenging. And it'd be hard to connect the dots. And so I think what I would be asking for is just some communication about what led up to that decision, if that was a decision made overnight, or that was something you felt for a long time, and then there was some catalyst that made you say that, and then what space looks like. So when people say I need space, that means very different things to different people. And so I always ask, well, what does that mean? What is need space? That means like I need a week or I need a month, or like I may or may not ever talk to you again. And then I want you to kind of work with what can you accept. So if he says, hey, I decided I need space, and what that looks like is maybe I'll call you sometime, you might say, oh, I'm not going to be available to wait around. I'm looking for more than that. But I think asking for more communication and then asking for what space actually means would be a good start. And then other things just to say, I'm sorry, it's a really challenging spot to be in. What would you advise if a person's family doesn't want their partner to join for Christmas? If the partner isn't there, they'll be alone, the family doesn't dislike them, but they're being weird. Okay, well, I actually like weird people, but like the good kind of weird. So this sounds like the bad kind of weird. I think you just have a decision to make, and it's unfortunate they're asking you to make that decision. Christmas and the holidays in particular can be really tough for people, and sometimes makes us kind of kooky, and we kind of get really excited and pressured about all these things that normally wouldn't be such a big deal, but because it's now the holidays, all of this stuff has to happen. And so I think what I would try to do is see, is there room for that person to attend? If not, then you have a decision to make. And I would decide to pursue the person who is the one that's healthy and there for me and showing up, and to do that and have boundaries with the other party. But without knowing all the details, it's a little challenging to answer that well. But I would just say that is a tough spot to be in. And so you got to look at that and make the decision about who am I going the long distance with, who am I in relationship with that is willing to communicate with me and have that healthy relationship, and that's where I'm going to go. It'd be better though if they didn't make you choose. Okay. Is it okay to wait a good amount of time to tackle a hard conversation that needs to happen in a friendship? I would love to do that now, but I'm emotionally drained. It's a great question. I think when we have to have a hard conversation, and this is something hard for me, I would rather just do that sooner than later. Well, scratch that. I would rather wait forever and not do it, but what I know to be true is doing it sooner than later makes more sense. And the reason is because it's fresh, and they know what it's about, and we can actually go there. So what I would do is I would wait long enough until you kind of process your emotions about it, so you can show up and be objective and actually have that conversation without getting flooded. Because sometimes we respond too quickly. Sometimes we're just really upset, and out of that being upset, we respond, and then we have a big conflict. So take enough time to kind of work through, what is my position? What do I want out of this difficult conversation? And where are my emotions at? Have I processed and managed those? And then enter into that conversation. The challenge is if we wait too long, the conversation becomes a little strained because time has passed. They also might not understand the intensity of it the way that we did. And it feels to them like we're just sitting on things. And so it's challenging for a person who feels like if we're in a relationship, you might sit on something for 6 months and not say it. Then we start to feel a little bit self-conscious about what else are you sitting on that you haven't talked to me about. And so for that reason, probably sooner than later. But if you ask me just my knee-jerk personal response, wait forever, put it off, don't have that conflict. But I will tell you, I've got some wonderful close friends where actually I've leaned into some of this stuff and it only made the relationship better. So I think in some ways it does clarify what kind of relationship it is by their response. If they say, oh man, this is uncomfortable, but thank you, you know this is a good person in my life. What do you do when you have issues with your boyfriend's mom and they have a weirdly almost unhealthy close relationship? Well, we should call our friend Dr. Freud on this one. Probably would love to talk about that. I think boundaries would be great for you and for them. And my question would be, do they think they have an unhealthy or weirdly close relationship? So I might start there. I might just talk to my boyfriend and just say, hey, what do you think about this relationship with your mom? Do you feel like it maybe needs some more boundaries, or do you feel like it's a little too close? Or, if we went with therapeutic terms, enmeshed, do you feel like this is an enmeshed relationship? And if not, why? If so, why? And then what can we do about that? And I think as far as having issues with his mother, you have to kind of assess, like, what is the capacity to do something about that? Is that a person we can have a discussion with and actually work towards some kind of resolution, or is this a person where I'm going to have to put a lot of boundaries around them and limit my investment in time because it's not going to work out? So I think that's how I would navigate that. How do I learn to trust and reconnect with my partner after they destroyed me through alcoholism and addiction? He is 4 weeks clean, and so I feel scared of who he is or what may happen. This is really challenging. It is really challenging to be in a relationship with someone who has active addiction. On the 4 weeks, I say congratulations. That's amazing and fantastic. That's awesome. However, the wounds are still there. And so one of the hard things for people who are entering into sobriety and recovery that they need to understand is, well, it is awesome that they have 4 weeks and that's a big deal for them. For the person they're with, they still remember that. It's just not been long enough for them to feel like it's different. And so as much as they might not want to, they have to take good care of you in that moment and say, like, I do understand there's consequences for my behavior. I do understand it hurts you. And for him, a lot of that is going to include empathy and validation of where you're at, how you're feeling. Because the truth is, you should be kind of afraid. 4 weeks is great, but again, 4 weeks does not necessarily signal a significant life change. It's a great start, but you should be cautious. So don't feel bad about being cautious. It's okay to communicate that. It's okay to celebrate the progress they do have, but we still have to do the work of healing and recovery in the relationship too. Okay, I'm going to answer, I don't know, I've got like maybe 10 more minutes. So I'm going to answer a couple more, but hopefully you guys can hear me fine and everything's going great. I sure love these questions. These are good ones. What to do if someone gives you mixed signals in the beginning? It looks like we were both interested, but it's been a while since I've been out there. Okay, yeah, this can be challenging because we don't want to do that thing where we pursue someone who's not interested, or where we sit on it and then they're like, I was really interested for a long time. You're like, I did not know that. So the simple answer is going to be just to communicate that. And how you might do that is you might share that you're interested if you're at that position in the relationship. Or you might ask them to do maybe a thing that is the next level of connection. So it might be, hey, do you want to get coffee together? If that's not something you've been doing. Yeah, I want to do that. Okay. But we just kind of take that next step and we see if they're responsive to that. Probably professing your love for them is going to be overshooting it a little bit. And so I think you just go, okay, this kind of looks like it makes sense to me and we're headed the same direction. What is the next logical right step that we would take? And then let's take that and see if they meet me there. If they don't meet me there, that's fine. Then I know if they meet me there, great, let's take the next one. And then eventually that's going to lead to a conversation about, hey, we've gotten coffee and gone to a movie, gone out to eat, went on a trip, and what is this exactly? And then we're going to have some clarity. And so just know, like, take the next step until we get to a place where it feels safe to have that conversation. At what point should one mention stuff when dating? So difficult stuff is what I'm understanding from that. So like maybe you have children with more needs or like an ex or something like that. So it's kind of like, at what point do I share some of this stuff in my life? And I think is this historical stuff or present day stuff? So if this is kind of, I had a really difficult time, 5 years ago, and that's over with, that might not be as important to share up front as it is to share the thing that's happening now, right? Presently, I'm in court with my ex and having a really difficult time, or my child is currently requiring this from me and it's really hard. I think those conversations need to be had sooner because it affects the relationship. And when it does, then we have to kind of invite that person to decide if that works for them or not. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, but I think if that is a present thing that's going to be part of the relationship we're going to be talking about, probably sooner than later. I don't know if that's first date stuff, but I think once you establish that you're interested and that this has potential, that's a conversation to have. Future mother-in-law is really unhappy about me and fiance getting married. There's an age difference, and I don't know how to deal with it. You probably always have the age difference. I don't know how to do that, so that's a bummer. But hey, congratulations. You guys are in love, and that's awesome. Not everybody understands that, and that's okay. They don't have to. My suspicion is if they see you two interacting and being healthy and having that relationship that works, they will soften over time. I think sometimes on paper it's easy to reject a relationship or to say age difference is too much. But if you two have a healthy relationship, I think eventually they'll soften to that. And so my kind of feedback would just be to give them some time to have some understanding and empathy for, it makes sense that you'd be concerned, like whatever that age difference is, there is that age difference. And so that makes sense that you would have questions or concerns about that. And we want to just demonstrate that we actually are pretty healthy and headed in the right direction. What do you think about trying an open relationship? What do you think about trying an open relationship? I think open relationships are really challenging, especially from the standpoint that we really need everybody to be on the same page. We have to have really great boundaries, good communication, conflict resolution. So it's kind of like we have to be able to do everything really, really well. What I sometimes see is couples who are not doing things well try to switch to an open relationship in an effort to kind of say, like, if we can't keep it up in a healthy way, we'll just have no rules and that'll somehow work better. And that often ends badly. So not knowing your situation, I think if you're at a place where you have healthy communication and boundaries and conflict resolution, and that is something that you feel you want to pursue and is in alignment with your values, and the other person agrees, that might be a fit for you. But I think we have to have a lot of things come together and a lot of conversations about it before that's done well. Okay, let's see. I'm maybe going to answer, one or two more. So how do I not give up on my own needs in a conflict and still acknowledge my boyfriend with an unsafe attachment always needs my apology to get over a conflict? Okay. So I think what I hear you saying is, number one, how do I not abandon myself? And that is really tough. Sometimes what we need to do is we need to take a step back from whatever that conflict is and just say, where am I at? What do I need and what do I think? And literally like write it down on paper, right? So you might literally write down, this is where I'm at, what I think, what I need. Because sometimes in the moment we lose it. It's really hard because we want to please, we want to make things okay. And so if we go in there and we're not prepared, we're likely to default to the thing we've always done, which is abandon ourselves or contort ourselves into what the other person wants. And so having a little preparation is really important, either before or if you need to take a second during the conflict and say, like, I got to just get really clear for a second and take a step back. I'll be back. We'll circle back to this, but this is where I'm at. And then come into it. That's going to give you some more confidence, which is going to be helpful and then help you to stick to those boundaries. So that would kind of be that part. If they always need an apology to get over a conflict, I would ask, what about? I think, and I might, have some people disagree with me, but I think in every conflict, there's two people, right? And so there's these roles we play. And so I know when I'm in conflict, what I'm looking to do is to figure out what would I have done differently next time. So if I could go back and do it again, how would I do it differently and how can I own that? And then I'll own it. I might say, like, hey, this is what I've identified is I would have loved to do that differently and I'm sorry about that. And so I'd say own what you can And if that is not acceptable and they want something else, can you get there, right? So if you say, okay, I owned what I could, and they actually just want me to blanket statement apologize for the whole thing, does that make sense for you? Probably not, right? Maybe there are times it does, but probably not. And so then again, we might need to take a second and say, here's what I hear you asking me for. I took a little time to reflect. Here's what I can offer. And there's a gap. So how do we work through that gap? But just know practicing this is the only way it's going to get better. And so just take it slowly and be really clear about what you need and want. Okay, last question. Chris Secor, thanks, man. How do you get rid of the syndrome of comparing myself to partner's ex? Has to do with self-esteem, and I realize it's emotionally draining, yet I can't stop myself from doing that. Comparison. It robs us of so much joy. And guess what? It's all around us. We can, in literally seconds, look up social media and compare ourselves to anybody else and find misery. And so I would just say, let's look at where we're at today. They are with you, not with them. Okay. And unless they have really poor judgment or just made some sort of impulsive decision, like they actually chose you on purpose. And so that's pretty awesome. And so whoever that other person was, that's really not of your concern, right? Because they're in a relationship with you. And I know it's hard, and I can relate, because sometimes I feel like an imposter in my life, and I feel like, oh man, I'm here, but I don't know that I deserve it, and I know other people that might be better, and they might be funnier, or more educated, or whatever that thing is that we tell ourselves. Just know, like, that's kind of normal and natural, but the farther down that path we go, the more likely we are to be unhappy. Because there is not happiness at the end of that comparison trail. That's just not what ends there. So we come back and we just say, what is happening today? I'm in a relationship with them. They seemingly care about me. I care about them. They believe I can show up. So I guess if they believe it, I'm going to try to believe it too. And then stop comparing yourself. And I know that's tough because it can be a really bad habit. But whatever you need to do to stop that, I don't care if you need to block whatever website or remove their profile, or I don't know what that is, but make it easy for you to avoid doing that, because it's going to be, the low-hanging fruit is to engage in that and then make yourself unhappy. Okay, last question for Lorelei. What if you have two people who are in a relationship and both have different attachment styles? Avoidant and anxious. Would communication be the key ingredient to make it work? Yes, and for whatever it's worth, oftentimes this happens. This is like your classic pursuer distancer relationship, and it really is super fun at the beginning and then not so fun as we go on. So the thing is we're wired differently. It's some of what makes us work, and it's also some of what makes us not work. And so just kind of having some grace about that and saying, like, yeah, sometimes this is actually awesome, and they help me really regulate things better than I would have. Appreciating that, but then also just saying, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's messy. And so communicating about, hey, this seems like this is kind of your typical response, is to approach this situation with some avoidance and leave me hanging. And what I actually need you to do is meet me in the middle. So how this works is we want to continually invite the other person to meet us in the middle, which means we're both taking a step into some risk and discomfort, but we're doing that to try to have a healthier relationship. The other thing I'll tell you that is really, really impactful is if you have these attachment styles like the avoidant and anxious, having a community of people who are securely attached, no joke, will change a lot for you, because you will have role models all around you who are going to show you how to do it better. And so then when you have that, you can look to some of those people and say, like, oh, that is what you do here. I know what I think I do here. I know what you think we do here, but this is actually how it would work in a healthy way. And so getting connected with a community of people who are doing it well makes a big impact in this relationship.